Shall we get started?
Yeah, let's get started. No, wait, I'm gonna get started. Okay, so let's see. So hi everyone, thank you for joining us tonight or this evening on your home. Let's see. This is a joint event with SF chapter and also Levels.fyi. And today we are going to, Zaheer and Zuhayeer are going to share tips on how to score a job in this present time of pandemic. And please submit your questions throughout the sessions, and we will also have a Q&A at the end. And you will get to share your experience at the end as well. So as I mentioned, this is a joint event between SF chapters and Silicon Valley chapter. So I'm going to talk about Women Who Code. So Women Who Code is a global community. We are in over 20 countries and 70 cities. We are a community of 200,000 technical women. Our vision is we want to have a world where women are represented as technical executives, founders, VCs, board members, and software engineers. And we are an inclusive community. We welcome everyone who supports our mission. And our mission is to encourage women to start enjoying tech. Our events are free. Here's a list of type of events that we host. We have study groups, technical trainings, workshops, interview preparation, hackathons, lightning talks, career navigation, and positive mindsets. Am I going too fast? I hope I have the speed right. Yeah. Okay. So Women Who Code Global has 6 different tracks. We have blockchain, cloud, Python, mobile, data science, and frontend. And each track has its own Slack group and website. So if you're interested in learning more about specific track, you can go to www.womenwhocode.com/track to find out more information. Okay, so Connect Digital is a remote developer conference held by Women Who Code Global. It's a free event. It's happening on 3 Fridays, starting this Friday. And you can sign up with the link, and notice that you have to sign up for individual day if you're interested in all of them. So yeah, here's a link and you can find out more. And we'll be sharing slides at the end, so you don't need to take screenshots or copy down a link. So we'll be sharing this later. And Women Who Code is always looking for volunteers. So I'm a volunteer with host management. And with being a volunteer, you can gain many benefits. For example, you can gain public speaking skills. You can present your technical expertise. Of course, the networking is a plus, for sure. Here's our code of conduct. So we are an inclusive community, and we welcome anyone who supports our mission. And we ask everyone to be respectful at our events. You can find out a full version of code of conduct on our website. Okay, cool. And we're on social media. Please connect with us. We also have a Slack channel. You can also reach out to us on Slack messages, and if you have any questions regarding Women Who Code. This is just for the Silicon Valley chapters. You can find out different chapters on the global website, www.womenwhocode. And if you're in Brazil, you can find out if there's a meetup, if there's a group in Brazil, then you can join that group as well. And we try to make local events, depends on where you are. But right now, everything is virtual, so you don't have to be part of us in order to join our virtual events. All right. So, oh, okay. So now I'm going to pass the baton to Zaheer and Zuhayeer from Levels.fyi.
Hey everyone. Let me just set up the screen share here. Okay. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. Let me know if there's any issues at any point. So my name is Zaheer Zuhayeer. I am one of the co-founders of Levels.fyi. And I'm also joined by my partner here, Zaheer.
Hey everyone. Yeah. Hey everyone, I'm Zaheer. Yeah. So
today our topic is how to navigate today's job market. And the structure, what we'll do is we'll have a presentation for about 20-30 minutes. We'll have a little bit of Q&A. That said, you can ask any questions throughout the presentation, just put in the chat box and we'll try to get to it. And then we'll finish off with kind of an interactive session. Obviously, right now we're in unprecedented times. No one has ever dealt with this situation, and we're all sort of learning from each other and together. And we really want the interactive session we want to open up the floor so that people can share their own unique experiences and how they've actually navigated today's job market, whether they've got a job or whether they got an offer rescinded or something like that. We want to share those sort of collective experiences and hope that it's useful for everyone. So we'll jump right into it. And if you're not familiar with Levels.fyi, Levels is the most accurate, or we aim to be the most accurate website to compare companies' salaries. We help you specifically to get paid your worth and make better career decisions. And we do that by collecting verified insider company information and sharing that on our website. So if you'd like to check it out, it's at www.levels.fyi. And our mission is to help people make better career decisions. To start, I'll actually start by sharing a personal story of my experience, one of my experiences. So in 2012, I was actually in university, and I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I get an internship for the summer? And I applied for hundreds of internships. I literally have a spreadsheet where I have like all of these companies listed. I ended up getting 2 interviews, and of those 2 interviews, I ended up getting 0 job offers. And so, I'm sure there might be other folks that can relate. Hopefully you don't relate because, I just had a terrible experience. But if you can relate, then this kind of story is for you. I was pretty bummed that I didn't have an internship. So what I decided was I wanted to still work on something technical over the summer. So what I did is I decided to try my hand at building a product. And, I looked around for ideas. I was trying to figure out, okay, what to do. Towards the end of the summer, I finally actually came up with an idea, and I built a website and app called Tags for Likes. Now, if you've never heard of it, Tags for Likes was one of the most popular companion apps to Instagram. And it helped you find the most popular hashtags on Instagram. So the product was really simple. I gathered the 100 most popular hashtags on Instagram. I put them into an app, and I also gathered hashtags for different categories. So if you're into sports, I'd have like sports hashtags, that sort of thing. Copying those hashtags into your Instagram pictures meant that anyone searching for those hashtags would see your pictures, and eventually it would actually lead to more people liking your pictures. The app ended up going viral, and it got millions of users. And till this day, there's actually hundreds of millions of pictures on Instagram tagged with the company's name, Tags for Likes. And so what I want to share is that my first entrepreneurial success came because I actually didn't have an internship one summer. Given the bleak job market right now, I was reflecting recently on that experience, and I was reminded that the most important work or internship experience that I ever had was actually just interning for myself. It was building my own product. It was building my own ideas. And it's easier than ever to actually build an idea, a tool, a website, an app, whatever you want to build. It's gotten so easy to to do that today. And solving a problem that you might have and putting it out there, it may just end up turning into the best job you've ever had. Even if it doesn't, you've just added something to your portfolio or to your resume to be worthwhile and to be shown to other employers. Or you might generate some side income, or it might lead to you being introduced into someone that ends up hiring you. And so I think the main point of sharing this story is that if you don't have a job, if you're looking for a job, if you're struggling to find an internship or a job or whatever it is, whatever your situation right now, don't or the biggest takeaway I'd like for you to take away from this is really to invest in yourself. It doesn't have to be in the form of building an idea. There are courses, free courses now. Coursera is giving out some free courses for free now. There's that you can take to up level your skill set. If you've struggled with technical interviews, this is a great time to brush up on your LeetCode and all your interviewing practice. This is a great time to up level. So really invest in yourself is, I hope, a sort of big takeaway that you take from this. And with that, I'll move on into some of the things that we're seeing at Levels.fyi recently, and some things around this unique time. Some market trends. Are you guys seeing the?
We're not seeing the slides. Yeah.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
Yeah.
That's a bummer. Let me.
Oh yeah, seeing it now.
Okay. All right. Well, that was supposed to be the slide that I was talking over before, but there you have it. I'll move on into market trends here. So obviously offers and jobs have slowed down. We've seen that at Levels because, we collect compensation information, we collect offers from folks. But what we have seen is that some companies are actually increasing hiring. And some companies are actually hiring more than they have in the past. So examples of that would be like Amazon and other companies that are actually benefiting from this unique situation. Now, the companies, although the number of jobs has slowed down, compensation remains pretty steady. So we're not actually seeing like a decrease in compensation or a decrease in offers that are being given out, especially for companies. And this is especially true for companies that are increasing hiring or continuing to hire. Obviously, we have seen some companies actually offer pay cuts, and that is something that's obviously troubling. But the vast majority of companies that we've seen have kept their compensation pretty steady. The other trend that we're actually starting to see, and this is over the last couple months when we were reviewing our data, is that we're seeing less junior level offers. And so we're seeing, specifically what we've seen is that typically the average years of experience for new offers that we would see is 3.5 years. Whereas now we're starting to see the average has become 4.5, about 4.5 years of experience. So people that are getting new offers, typically it's someone that's has a little bit more experience than they would have had before, and that makes sense intuitively with the job market as companies are sort of contracting their hiring. They do want to hire and focus on more senior level talent. But that said, again, hopefully it doesn't dissuade you from applying. Many companies are still hiring new candidates and candidates at all varies of experience. And that takes me into the job search. How do you search for jobs? And if you already have a job, then how do you prepare? How do you still prepare for it's something that might happen? And how do you be prepared for in potentially unfortunate event? So the main message over here is what we like to tell folks is to focus your outbound and create inbound opportunities. So focus your job search and create opportunities for people, for employers to reach out to you. What does that look like? On focusing your job search at Levels, what we've done is we've started gathering a list of companies that are hiring. And this list is actually, unlike many, there are actually many similar lists to this, and we've linked a couple on the slides, which will be sent out to you. But what we've done is we've actually also are verifying with the employers that they're still hiring. A lot of these lists are sort of crowdsourced and may not be verified, but the one thing that we wanted to make sure is that the list of companies that we're putting up on the site are folks that are actually still hiring. And I'll actually show you the page in a moment over here. But there are many of these lists, and you do want to make sure that when you're applying, you're focusing on the companies that are actively hiring versus companies that may have job postings but may not have actually taken them down yet. And we've actually heard that from candidates where there's job postings still up, but they're actually not hiring, or they're rescinding offers or things like that. And so the key over here is, number one, is to focus your job search. And a sort of layer on top of this is all companies are remote right now. What that means to you is that consider applying to remote first companies. Consider applying to companies that don't have a quote unquote location, traditional location. As an example, GitLab is a company which is completely remote. And so they don't have, if you're narrowing your job search by a location, a lot of people like to, when they're searching for jobs, put in like San Francisco or some location for their search. Consider searching remote jobs only. And given that everyone's already remote right now, and it is something worth considering. And obviously remote isn't for everyone, but at the same time, it's kind of the reality of today. So consider applying for those sorts of companies. Even companies that aren't remote, I know Amazon, for example, they're planning on starting to slowly bring people back in the office, but it would still be at a lower capacity than they had in the past. And so, you're going to be no different than a large chunk of the workforce is essentially what I'm saying here. And with that, I'll actually transition into a quick demo of our still hiring page, which I hope helps folks. Let me pull this out over here. I'm going to go to our still hiring page. This is our still hiring page. The URL for it is levels.fyi/still-hiring. Hopefully someone can send that out in the chat. What we have here is a list of companies. You'll see here that we have a couple hundreds. We have hundreds of companies now that are on this list. And you'll see that you can filter by different roles. We have all sorts of roles here, not just software engineering. And I also want to mention that you can sort it by, when it was last updated. So, this company was last updated today. We just verified with them today that they are still hiring. And, you have the apply link there. If you'd like to browse by location, we also have a map for you, which I think this is pretty cool, but you can see all of the different companies that are hiring by location around the world. My computer is a little bit slow right now because I'm sharing my screen and on Zoom and things, so bear with me over here. But this is just a brief map. And if we go back to the list, we hope this list is helpful for folks. There's also comments that employers have directly commented if they have a pitch line, or if they have a, some people have actually messaged that if some people that have contributed here have actually mentioned that if you're looking for a referral, then you can reach out to them. And some of the people have actually even given us the referral link for the apply link. And so, if you apply through the link on our site, you may actually be eligible for a referral as well. So yeah, I just wanted to show you this page. And if you're not familiar with Levels, I also want to show you our homepage over here and how you can use it for your job search. Later on in the talk, we'll be going through, we'll be talking about salaries and negotiation a little bit. And so this is our main page. What you see here is recent salary submissions of folks that have recently contributed their salaries. So, you'll see the various offers here. And over here below, you'll actually see how you can compare levels for a company. And this is important in your job search. When you're applying for jobs, you want to make sure that you're not short selling yourself and that you're coming in at the right level. And this is what this tool sort of hopes to help you do. It just compares, every company has their own leveling scheme and their own hierarchy for engineers. So for example, at Google, if you join as fresh out of college, you'll join Google as an L3 engineer. If you get promoted, you'll get promoted to L4 and so on. And so let's say you're at L4 at Google and now you're considering a job at Facebook. You want to make sure that you're aiming for that E4 level, which is the equivalent title. You don't want to be down leveled into an E3, which commonly happens. So that's just kind of a brief demo on Levels.fyi. You can explore the site afterwards. I don't want to take up too much time here. But definitely do check out the site for salary information specifically. We hope that it helps you in negotiating higher salaries there. Looks like my screen just broke out. Okay, cool. Now, the last chunk of this is creating inbound opportunities. So on this, there's different ways to create. You don't just want to be surfing for jobs, but I think a strategy that people often overlook is to actually create opportunity for yourself. Make it easy for other people to contact you. And this makes the job search process a lot less exhausting. Add yourself, if you've been laid off, there's a bunch of laid off lists over here. We've linked to one. Add yourself to one of these layoff lists and see if folks contact you, right? A lot of people are actually browsing these lists, especially the companies that are still hiring. They're using these lists to find new candidates. Engage your network. If you have had an offer that is rescinded, don't be ashamed of posting that on LinkedIn that you've gotten an offer rescinded. Many people are going through the same troubling times right now, and folks will be happy to amplify your message and amplify your post to hopefully get to someone that's hiring. So do post about, if you've gotten an offer rescinded or if you're laid off. There's no shame in that, and definitely engage your network, reach out to people, and use it as as an excuse, quote unquote, to reach out to people. Definitely update your LinkedIn. And something that a lot of folks forget is you can actually mark your LinkedIn as open to opportunities. And we have the link for you there as well. But you can actually mark it so that when recruiters are searching on LinkedIn, it's easier for them to find you. And then lastly, I do want to highlight that building a personal brand is something that a lot of folks overlook. And a personal brand doesn't mean that you're like an influencer or anything. It just means that putting yourself out there a little bit extra. And what that can look like is, sharing a tip a day on LinkedIn, or sharing, something on Twitter about, some interesting technical problem that you may have come by. It doesn't have to be like, I am now an influencer in a full-fledged like brand. You can start with these small little actions that actually build your personal brand and put your name out there, so that when, let's say there's a hiring manager that may have come across your post, when they have a new opportunity available, they'll remember you that, oh, okay, this person is looking, or this person shared something that was interesting, and they'll recall your name. And so we do, something that we like to tell folks is, create inbound opportunity. And this is just another way of creating that inbound opportunity. And there's a lot of different ways about it. These are just a couple actionable tips that we hope to provide, but do, explore what unique ways that you can bring to this. And with that, we'll move on to the next sort of segment by Zaheer.
Hey everyone, actually wanted to kind of just gauge if there are any questions, so we can kind of keep it engaging. If anybody has anything, we can kind of just go over anything. If they want to pop it into the chat, I'll maybe give it like a few seconds. Okay, do you have any tips on how to build a personal brand? So yeah, as Zaheer mentioned, I think like, for example, like having a LinkedIn presence, and that could even start with like, right now, like just posting something, or even like one underrated thing in my opinion is like sort of like commenting on other people's posts as well. That's also a good way to build a brand, because you're directly kind of engaging with like someone else. Like for example, like if someone else has a rescinded offer and you don't, like you can amplify their voice by commenting and like liking their post, and engaging with content that you see on LinkedIn. And that also gives you kind of, like it kind of builds like your network too. Like people kind of can see that. And I mean, that's not the only way. You can also like, if someone asks a question or, needs a resource, you can be helpful in many ways. So I don't think it's just like, you don't have to be the original creator of content. You can always reply to people. So that's like one underrated way.
Another sort of underrated way, and kind of a secret, I think, to a lot of folks, is that LinkedIn is a great place for sharing content, and it's largely untapped. On by sharing content on Twitter or Instagram or any of these other forums, you know, the audience might be good, but on LinkedIn, you actually have, what I've noticed is that because not many people share things on LinkedIn, you know, any post that you post will actually get a ton of visibility. And I've seen that personally on my own posts. And you know, I've like, as an anecdote, the story that I shared with you guys at the beginning of the presentation of my internship experience, I had posted on LinkedIn originally, and that ended up getting like 100,000 views on LinkedIn. I'm not like a famous person on LinkedIn or anything. I don't have that many connections, but I ended up getting like a huge amount of views for something that was, you know, that I just kind of wrote up in a couple minutes. And so if there's any tips that you have on, you know, on coding, or if there's any like interesting tidbits that you notice, don't be afraid to post anything that comes to your mind, even if you seemingly think that it's small. Someone else might actually find it much more valuable. So definitely do post on LinkedIn. I think it is largely untapped, and I think it's a great way to actually build your personal brand and get a lot of inbound folks to your profile.
Mm-hmm. We got another question here. How do you negotiate salary during this difficult time? And I think I'll touch upon that a little bit in this next section. So maybe save that question until I go over some of my stuff. The next question, companies don't want to hire junior devs without work experience, but if you can't get work experience, it ends up as a vicious cycle. It's a chicken and egg problem. I'm working on personal projects, but I don't know if that will be enough. Any additional tips? Like that's definitely like, I think it relates to Zaheer's story a little bit. Like, you know, like if you don't get the opportunity, then you don't have experience. And then how are you supposed to get experience? And I think just identifying little opportunities, like even if they're like, you know, like not, you know, maybe they're not the biggest like companies or whatever, there are opportunities out there in nooks and crevices that, you know, people are kind of overlooking. And you can always build your experience through like different ways. And I think it just takes a little bit of creativity to kind of, you know, go out and like maybe make something for yourself for a problem that you face, or, you know, just joining something, like, you know, lending a hand to something to like, you know, put it on your resume. And I know it might not like, you know, it might not be super like easy to seek these out, especially now, like, since, you know, there aren't as many, you know, in-person kind of, you know, spontaneous kind of meetups and stuff like that. But I think like, you know, you can work the internet and you could kind of reach out to people that you think are doing interesting work and say, hey, I want to help out. And I want to, you know, I think like, I really believe in this product. And I'll touch on this a little bit too, like on how you can cold email people potentially.
One thing I'll just add over here is I totally empathize with you of it is a chicken and egg problem, where if you don't have experience, how do you get the experience to actually get a job? And it's unfortunate, but again, I think it comes down, we're fortunate in our careers where in software engineering, it's very easy for you to actually build something without needing, like, for example, if you're a scientist or something, you would need a lab and all of this additional stuff to actually go out and build something, you know, worthwhile in your field. Whereas as software engineers, we have the opportunity to actually build stuff with nothing more than your laptop, right? And a lot of the traditional ways to actually gain experience that, you know, people tend to forget are one of the biggest ways is actually contributing to open source projects, right? Look on GitHub, find out if you can contribute to any open source projects, and that's a great way. It shows a ton of value to employers too, that if you're contributing to a strong open source project. Another way that I would mention is, you know, try to join a hackathon, try to build something. If you yourself feel that maybe I don't have enough experience to build a product or something, a website end to end, join a hackathon and join a team that might have more experience than you and that you can partner with and contribute to. And there are virtual hackathons still happening. So that is something worth considering. And obviously the third thing, which is, like you mentioned, working on personal projects. You know, you might not feel like it's enough, but, you know, you'd be surprised of how much personal projects can actually take into account when recruiters or even hiring managers are looking at your resume. For example, when I used to work in Amazon, I would also review resumes and folks that we're hiring. personal projects was a big sort of factor in when I was reviewing resumes, because again, it shows that someone is willing to go. It shows that someone is proactive and willing to learn and is able to learn on their own and is able to build something from scratch. So I would just say to not sort of shortchange that in the sense that it does have a big sort of impact.
Mm-hmm. Another question, how do we find good open source projects that we can contribute to? Do you have a recommended site that lists like these down along with the tech stack? I'm actually personally not super familiar. Like I'm just familiar with GitHub, and kind of looking at like the most starred repositories is like a good way to find like the big ones, I think.
Yeah, I think what for this, I would say if you're using an open source project, like let's say you're using, I don't know, like React is kind of a big project, and so I don't know if that's a great starter project. But like check out any, what you can do is also go online and find, maybe there's a website that you use regularly, and look at, inspect what libraries that they use or open source tools that they use, and use that as a starting point of finding other projects to contribute to. I think there might be resources. I feel like I've seen resources on, easy starter open source projects to contribute to. If I find them, then I'll send them in the chat. Or if anyone knows about those resources, then please share in the chat. But I feel like I've seen like lists of open source projects that are easier to contribute to, so you might want to look at that. But again, I would start with probably projects that I would have used personally myself in developing a product or something to contribute to.
Yeah, so one link that was sent was firsttimersonly.com. And
Great.
as well as a few others in the chat, so you can check that out. With that, I'll probably go into my section here. Zaheer is controlling slides, right?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. All right. Yeah. I'll try to indicate to you. But I just want to quickly go over this. I guess it seems like the questions might be a more interesting way, and these slides will probably go out to everyone. So I'll just quickly kind of go over some of these tips here. So a few things that like you can do to kind of help your job kind of application process is, one thing on your resume, if you have had a offer rescinded, is that you can put it on your resume and put rescinded in parentheses. Like Zaheer mentioned before, like there's no shame in that. In fact, it shows kind of like social proof that you were a good candidate and you were accepted to a company for a role. And that means like, it shows that like you had the qualifications to get that role. And so if anything, it could build some sort of social proof for you. So definitely like, list that in your resume. It's something that like a lot of people are doing and have found helpful. And this has also been mentioned in the past, by Zaheer just a few minutes ago, but referrals from friends are super important. Even if you can find a friend of a friend on LinkedIn that you can potentially ask for a connect to, it's sort of like a win-win situation. Like good companies are looking for talent, and if your talent, like they want you, so you kind of want to just put your like foot in the door and like go out of your way a little bit just to reach out, and people are most of the time very happy to help. Like virtual events like this also kind of help. Like maybe if people are, want to connect on LinkedIn afterwards, like, feel free to like use the chat in that capacity as well. And we'll have a chance for reflections at the end as well. And I think that'll be helpful too. Personalized cold emailing, like you'll be surprised how little like effort, like just like I'm talking like a matter of a few seconds of difference that can make, that can help you get a reply from a recruiter. And, that just involves like looking up a little bit of information about the company and just adding in a line or two about like what you know about the company and why you would want to work there. And a lot of recruiter emails are just like these kind of machine copied emails. And like a lot of the time it doesn't end up getting a response. And I think just going that little extra step can have a really, really huge impact. In terms of finding emails, there's this trick that I sort of use and I thought could be helpful is you could use like first name, last name patterns and at the company email address, and then like type it into your kind of email client. And typically, like if a kind of profile shows up, if you hover over it, that means it's like a valid email. And so you can use that to kind of like send an email to recruiters that you might not actually have the official email for. And there are also other tools, like I think there's Email Hunter and stuff like that. You might have to sign up, but I found like this to be actually really effective. Like you can typically find like the pattern in just like a few kind of iterations. But as Zaheer also mentioned earlier, you want to invest in yourself. This is a really good time to make something. And you know, like I always like to take note of, you know, everything we're going through. And like a few friends were suggesting to me, like there are a lot of good ideas that you can kind of build. And while like, you know, while picking up a new skill, while doing something noteworthy at the same time. And these investments kind of give you like these double folded advantages. And it's pretty amazing. Like one thing a friend of mine was actually telling me earlier today is, you know, especially with Black Lives Matters and the whole movement going on right now, there are like some simple tools that we can build as like technical people. One thing that my friend was telling me was you can kind of build like a banner, like a kind of like a plugin for sites to easily add in like a banner for resources to help the cause. And that would be like a cool project that you can definitely list on like your resume. And it would be super helpful, and it just has many advantages, right? And since we're capable of doing that, it's definitely like it's really amazing opportunity to kind of help out. And I think there's like a lot of opportunities like that if you look around and right now. So we'll go to the next slide. Yeah, and so I wanted to give a few email examples for like essentially like what a you know, a poor email might be and like a good email might be. Some resources are being sent in the chat for like email help and finding like emails for people. So be sure to check that out. Connect.clearbit.com and Rocket Outreach, I believe. And but yeah, like if you look on the right, like really it's just a few seconds of improvement to the email where you kind of, you know, add some enthusiasm, add some, you know, some more information, and like use spacing in a, you know, kind of neat way to kind of organize your email. And, you know, it really increases the odds of potentially getting a reply. Versus on the left, right, if you look at this, it's a very like machine kind of copy, and you like a lot of people might look at that and just kind of gloss over it. People love being flattered. And so I think that's something you can kind of use to your advantage by like, you know, emailing potential like, you know, founders or even just recruiters saying, hey, I love your product. And, you know, I use it for so-and-so, and kind of actually build a relationship like that. Yeah. And yeah. And if anyone has any good email templates that have worked for them, feel free to share as well. Go to the next slide. Yeah, so a little bit of advice on, I guess, the recruiting process. Like I mentioned with the emails, like it doesn't hurt to have as many threads open as possible, especially right now. These conversations can carry on later in your career, and you can reopen these threads. And since things are kind of remote right now, like you can have a conversation with someone at a physical location that you would never even really consider moving to. And I think that's super underrated. Like you can kind of email any company right now, anywhere in the world, and just have a conversation and keep an open thread. And I mean, obviously you don't have to like take a job at, you know, any of those companies, but you can start a conversation. And especially if you have time on your hands, and if you're fortunate enough to, you know, just be sheltering at home, like I think it's a really good opportunity. Maintaining flexibility. So this was kind of like a nuanced point I wanted to make about how you can, for a lot of larger to mid-sized to larger companies, you can still push on your timeline. Just because we're in a crisis, it doesn't mean you have to alter like how quickly you interview or how quickly you might, you know, take your start date. you can still, exercise flexibility in needing more time to make a decision, or needing more time to actually, schedule an interview once you are, past a certain process. Like, I think it is an employer's market, and it's good to be kind of wary of, like, whether you might be kind of being taken advantage of, and to kind of step back and, like, if you really need the time, potentially, like, you should kind of demand it from companies. And that's sort of, you're right. Yeah. And one other thing, lining up interviews. You typically, when you're preparing for coding interviews, it's much easier to kind of knock all of these interviews out, like, at the peak of your preparation altogether, just so you don't, forget any principles or algorithms, and, have to review it later on again for another interview that might be identical to the interviews that you've already taken a few months ago. And so it's a really good idea to kind of just make sure you just do it all at once. And especially now, since things are kind of remote, you don't have to drive to an interview. So maybe you can do, like, several interviews a day. I mean, not for everybody, but, like, at least, like, you have a little more flexibility in being able to do interviews remotely. So maybe that helps you kind of, pack more interviews into a week, potentially, if you do the interview super week method, where you have kind of like an interviews for 1 week. And that's typically been helpful to people who, prepare for like a while, and then just clear out all the interviews in a week and just see what they get. And that's why I brought up the point about maintaining flexibility, so that you can kind of, make sure to kind of align the timings for, like, different interviews, so that, you have that ability. And, this is something you can also explain to recruiters, depending on the company. Like, hey, I'm looking to interview at, these few other companies, and would like to do my interview this week. Negotiation. So typically, like, a lot of times recruiters may ask you the question, like, what are your salary expectations? And typically we suggest, like, folks kind of reflect that question back to recruiters. We don't think it's a good time to answer that question in the beginning. It's something that should come ideally after, like, you've completed interviews and at offer stage. So if they ask you that question, you can kind of reflect it onto them and say, what are the salary ranges for this role at your company? And look for an answer for them. And then if they give you an answer, you can say, okay, thank you. And I'll probably take my time to, understand what my salary might be. And I think it's completely okay to do that. And we're also happy to help with people on an individual basis. If you message us on our site, we're happy to kind of help you through your negotiation process if you're at that step. But once again, do want to mention that, like, Levels.fyi, even without our help, you can kind of just go to the website and view salary ranges for particular companies and locations. And feel free to peruse that information at the offer stage to kind of negotiate your salary. Next slide. Yeah, and as I just mentioned, you can still negotiate. Just because we're in a crisis, we've seen compensation still be steady. And I think, like, companies will try to take advantage of candidates, but I think it's important that candidates hold their ground, so that they know, what they should be negotiating for, and not kind of selling themselves short. Next slide.
Yep. And just another example here. I had actually helped an engineer just a couple of weeks ago. We were still in the middle of the crisis. We still are in the crisis, but just a couple of weeks ago, I helped a candidate negotiate $30K more on their offer. So, you can still negotiate. Definitely do negotiate. Just because we are in a tight situation with in the job market and things, it does not mean that you shouldn't be getting your fair worth. So definitely do still negotiate. And again, we are open if you need help negotiating. Feel free to message us. We kind of, we are open to helping this kind of folks negotiate. It helps us keep a good tab on the market as well. So definitely do reach out if you need specific help with that.
Right. And some, I guess, reasons why you should negotiate, it's estimated, like according to a study by Linda Babcock, I believe, from CMU, candidates lose out on an estimated $1.5 million over the span of their career by not negotiating for their first kind of salary after graduating. And the reason why that is because this salary compounds over time, right? You receive a raise, and when you're initially set back, it's hard to kind of catch up to the next few raises that you might get, and you might have gotten if you've like negotiated. And typically, like, negotiating is like a few minutes phone call, and it has a very outsized impact on your compensation and your life, basically. So I think everyone should do it. It's it takes like 5 minutes on a phone call to just actually have that conversation, and it has a very, very big impact on over the span of your career. So some general tactics for what you want to have to negotiate. Like, by far the best way to negotiate an offer is to have multiple offers. If you have an offer, the conversation kind of shifts away from, oh, this is what I want, to, oh, this is what you're going to have to give me to match, right? And so that would like really, really help you kind of get, the salary that you may want. And so, and which is why people kind of, make sure to kind of interview at multiple companies. They don't just have one target company. They make sure to have like different kind of options on the table. If you get an uncomfortable question on the phone with a recruiter or someone from the company that you're kind of talking to, you can always defer the question. I think it's always like, a lot of people have mentioned that like they've had these tough questions kind of fielded at them, and you can always feel free to kind of step back and just say, I'll have to review this and get back to you in a few days, if possible by email. And you don't have to answer everything right away, especially if you're unsure about whether you should be answering that or not. And companies are very well trained to do this. They do this almost every day through recruiting and negotiations processes. So feel free to kind of play that card. Reflecting questions back, as I mentioned earlier, is key. You want to kind of clarify, different things about an offer if you're in an offer stage, or make sure that like, you're getting kind of, full accuracy on exactly what's going on. Like, for example, with startups, you want to make sure you know how much options you're getting, and how much that would cost to exercise, how much it would cost, like what the strike price is in startups. And just kind of knowing all of that information over the course of, the standard 4-year vesting schedule at a company. And do not be afraid to kind of ask those questions. And it's really important too. One format that I like to, I guess, point out to people is like, if you have like a set number in mind, like a tactic that you could potentially use is like, I'm ready to sign today if you can get my offer to, 250,000, for example. And it's kind of a way to kind of just set an ultimatum to companies and put the ball in their court, essentially. And I think that's a pretty successful way that some people have negotiated, and I think it's worked out well for a few folks. And then there are certain things, like, for example, exploding offers and tight deadlines that companies kind of maliciously use to put pressure on you. I kind of recommend people to not be afraid of those, and almost not be afraid to kind of renege on those offers. Like, they are kind of like a malpractice by companies. But if that does happen to you, I would kind of ask for more time and ask for like an extended deadline anyway, and say, hey, I'm looking to interview at these few companies over the next few weeks, and if I can't weigh those options, then this isn't going to be right for me.
A couple questions that just came in, if you don't mind.
Let's do it.
First one, do you see relocation offers being affected by the pandemic? So by the way, we collect offer letters and W-2 statements from people as part of our collection of data on Levels.fyi. And based on what we've seen is even in the new offers that we're getting, relocation packages have not been affected, as in we're still seeing companies offer them. Obviously, your move situation might look very differently, but that assistance is still being provided. So good question there. Another question: what is an exploding offer? Exploding offer is essentially companies will sometimes tell you that, oh, you have until X date to get back to us and either accept or deny the offer. And it's called exploding offer because it'll explode on that date essentially. The thing is that a lot of times it's generally an artificial date, and there's no if you go beyond that date, obviously within conversations with the recruiters, usually you can push back that date and really push back against that. Even if you don't meet that date, a lot of times candidates still are able to accept even after that date. It's just a tactic that recruiters and companies use to get you to really force your hand and accept an offer. But again, be aware of it, be conscious that it's just a tactic. You can always usually push that date. If a company has invested all of this time to interview you and get you the offer, and again, it's not cheap for the company to even interview you, right? They have to give an engineer's time to go through that process. If they've gotten to that stage, they're not going to let you go so easily. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind. Let's see. How would you answer a question about your current salary? Zaheer, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. I actually don't even think it's legal here to ask that question. You don't have to field that information. And once again, like I mentioned, I think like a good way to maybe handle that situation is reflect the question to them and say, what is the current salary range for this role at this level at this company, and see what they say. But yeah, and also like another way to field that question could also be, I don't think that's something I want to answer just yet. I want to like kind of go through the process with this company and get to offer stage first.
Yeah, and you can always be firm that you're not comfortable sharing that information. It's perfectly okay to respond that, right? Again, there's no obligation to answer that question, and they're not gonna stop the interview process or prevent you from interviewing typically if that on that question, right? In California, I believe, and maybe in other states, they're not allowed to ask that question. But even in places where they are allowed to ask that you can just be firm and say that you're not comfortable answering. Piggybacking on the salary question, especially from a different state with a completely different cost of living. Again, I would say, especially if you're in a different state and a different cost of living, it's never in your favor typically to answer or to give information of what your current salary is. It almost never plays to your benefit unless the offer that the company is giving you is significantly lower or lower than your current offer. I would always, anytime you're asked that question, just as a rule of thumb, never give that information away. And you will typically, because if you give a number that's too low, then that gives them room to offer you something lower. If you give a number that's too high, at best case, they will give you something higher. At worst case, they'll say that you're out of budget. So it's just in general, I would say just don't answer that question. Let's see some other questions that we have coming in. How do you advise to push back on exploding offers? Would it be okay to say that you're waiting on one company to hear back? That's a perfectly acceptable strategy to use as well. If you can say something along the lines of, and I've actually utilized this tactic that, hey, I'm currently waiting on a couple other companies. I want to make sure I have all of the information before I make a significant decision for my life. And companies are generally very willing to adjust that date. And even if you don't have another offer, or if you're not waiting on another company to hear back, you can always deflect and say something along the lines of, hey, I need more time to think about this. you know, I need to get back. You know, I have to discuss it with my family or my mentor or so and so.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
there's that.
And also just throwing in like, you know, a line like, I would love the opportunity to work at this company. And I really think like, you know, I'd be an amazing fit, but I want to make sure like, you know, I have like these other options, you know, that I can consider before making a significant life decision, as Zaheer mentioned. And usually like, you know, if you're excited to work at their company and they're going to lose you just because of some arbitrary date, they're probably not going to, you know, slide that offer from underneath your feet. Like they'll probably keep it.
Cool. And there's some helpful information in the comments that people have posted about states that have enacted laws on banning the salary question. So again, it is forbidden by law for recruiters to ask you that, or you know, you don't have to answer it by law, basically. So and there's several states. Even if you are not in those states, I know we have folks from all over the world. You know, always deflect that question.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can continue with the presentation. Zaheer, if you want to move to the next slide.
Yeah. This is the last slide, I believe.
Cool. Sweet.
But yeah, so things to negotiate for isn't just limited to, you know, salary and compensation information. There are non-monetary compensation in things like benefits, you know, things like location. Obviously now things are remote, but like the team you're on, as well as like, you know, things like your start date and, you know, time off. So you can negotiate for kind of all of these things, and they're all part of like your total rewards, is what companies call it, your total rewards and compensation. And so your monetary compensation comes in the form of, you know, base, stock, bonus, which forms your kind of like monetary compensation, and then you have all these other aspects that you can negotiate for as well. For example, like if you're, you know, if you have a family, you want to make sure that you have kind of health coverage for everyone in your family. There are companies that provide specifically childcare benefits, and being able to kind of compare that information is super helpful. It's actually something we're working on, and would be happy to slide a link here later, but we're working on like a benefits comparison tool as well. And now I think, especially now in this time with remote, it's you can kind of take advantage of that and, you know, choose to join a team that might have not been in your physical location, but you can join that team, you know, virtually now at a company. So you can kind of get like, you can choose to have preference for certain teams at a company once you're in their process. And I think, you know, with virtual, that it just becomes much easier to kind of request that. And as well as obviously pushing back your start date. Like if you are in between jobs, you want some time off, you need some time, you know, make sure to kind of account for that. And you can always push back, like once they've given you an offer, you can kind of push back and say, hey, I would like to start a month later, or like a few months out. You've already gone through the process, you have an offer on the table. This is usually something companies will entertain and, you know, work with you on. Yeah, and that's sort of everything at a high level overview. Definitely love to answer more questions and get people's kind of experiences, and just let people kind of share a little bit more about their personal stories.
One quick thing on the benefits, we are actually rolling out on Levels. As Zaheer mentioned, we are starting to collect benefits information. Traditionally, we've only collected salary information and leveling information. But it's a new feature that we're kind of adding to the site. We've already added it for some companies. So if you click on a company's name or go to the company page on our site, then you'll actually start to see some benefits filled out. But we're actually, it's actually pending launch this week. So look out for that, and definitely contribute your benefits too if you know benefits at a certain company. We're trying to make it very easy for people to compare benefits. And what we also want to do is actually attach kind of a monetary value to those benefits, so that, traditionally it's hard to actually compare, okay, all of these benefits and compare how much it's worth to individuals. So we want to help solve that problem. So look out for that launch this week as well. But yeah, I think we're good to go to the Q&A section now, and then we'll also move towards sharing your experiences. If you personally have experienced something or gone through, the hiring process during this time, we'd love to hear from folks. you know, what unique challenges or what unique strategies or tips or things that you had while going through this experience. I think we'll try to take a couple Q&A and then we'll move to that sharing experience section. So definitely, if you have an experience to share, definitely put it in the comment sections and we'll queue you up next for, I guess, sharing that. Let's see, more questions. How do you answer if a company offers a low base salary but says they'll make it up later in terms of a performance bonus? You know, that's a great question. I think it's something interesting to note is that even if a company offers you a high salary up front, they obviously can they can prevent you from having a high bonus later on. Now it is kind of predatory and it is not great, but you want to keep in mind that as you are negotiating for a large offer up front, it does also, it can have impact on future on future bonuses and things like that. That's not to say that you shouldn't negotiate, just something to keep in mind as you move through your career at that company. You know, if you realize that, okay, if you negotiate very hard and got a really great first time offer, you know, you may see that your second year bonus might be smaller, right? It's just something to kind of keep in mind, and you know, looking forward, basically that has happened. I have seen that happen. So just kind of something to keep in mind. But to actually answer the question, you know, I think it's I think you still have to go back to the same negotiation tactics of, you know, still trying to negotiate the base salary. You know, if it's a performance type of thing, if they aren't confident in your performance, maybe pointing them to projects or explaining some of the experiences that you had in the past to actually share that, you know, let's say you led a team or you delivered a project A to Z. Give them confidence in your abilities, and hopefully that was done through the interview. But even afterwards, continue to give them confidence in your abilities. That, you know, you want to make sure that you're giving them a reason to give you more, right? And so continue to provide that reason for them. If a recruiter comes back and says, "Hey, I don't think you are this next level," give them a reason to actually get you to the next level. And that is a form of negotiating compensation, is asking for the next level title, right? So definitely provide that reasoning to them. Give them a reason for you to give you more.
Yeah, and to add to that, you want to make sure you kind of capitalize on base and stock, for public companies at least, stock, because those are kind of guaranteed kind of things that renew every year, versus like things like bonus isn't guaranteed, right? So you always want to kind of optimize for kind of base, and at least in this situation you want to optimize for base. And the best way to do this is to have multiple offers on hand. If you have another offer that has a higher base salary, that's like, you know, that's something you can point out to them and say, "Hey, I have a higher base salary, but I'm, you know, really excited about this company and this opportunity. You know, if you can get this offer to that level, I'll sign," you know? And another thing to kind of keep in mind also is, like, typically companies have a percentage, kind of percentage for performance bonus that they typically max it out at. So like some companies have 20%, some companies have 15% of the base salary that they kind of point out in the offer letter itself. So if you can, like, if they aren't willing to move on the base salary at all, you at least want to clarify like how much of the performance bonus you can expect. So how much percentage of your base salary would it account for? And potentially, like, you know, if that's not available, how much of it in concrete dollars would that amount to?
Cool. Some other questions I'm seeing. How do you deflect the salary question? By saying you need to look into the market salary for location. If the recruiter is very insistent on getting a salary number, I actually personally have never seen this happen, and I've helped other folks negotiate as well. But if they are extremely insistent and they are just, you know, not letting you go on that question, number one, I would be firm and continue as far as possible. Personally, I think most recruiters will drop it at that point. But if they are continuing to be insistent, then I would try to, you know, offer just I would tell them a much larger number essentially. By saying a lower number, you're giving them the wiggle room to offer you something lower. So, try to figure out the market rate. You can do that on Levels or, by asking friends or whatever it is. And add 20% or add some percentage to that amount and tell them a higher amount. If they say that that's too much, then ask them what they think is fair, right? Flip it back on them. Now the ball is in their court. Just put the ball back in their court, basically, by giving a higher number. Right. Again, I think that is quite rare. I think that most recruiters will be willing to drop that question if you're firm and insistent.
Right.
How do you source the companies on Levels? The way that we source it is largely, if you don't see your company in our dropdown or on our list of companies, we do still have more companies that we have data for on the compensation page. So if you go to the compensation page, you can search for a company. It's all based on user contributions. So just depending on what people have contributed, we will or may not have data. We do have a good amount of companies, but again, there are a lot of smaller companies we don't have data for. But definitely do check out the compensation page and try searching for the company on there if you don't see it in the list of drop-down companies. And
if you don't find your company specifically, if you kind of go through our list, or if you know of a similar company on Levels.fyi at a similar stage with a similar kind of for a similar role, you can kind of use that as a kind of anchor for your salary information, just to kind of understand what the compensation at least should be anchored at around.
Yep. Another good question is timeline for new grad jobs. New grad jobs as well as internships. It's kind of the same timeline where you want to start applying the year before. So let's say I am graduating. I was graduating this year, right, in 2020. I actually should have started applying if I was looking for a job in last year, November of last year. That's usually when applications for internships and new grad jobs for the following year open up. That said, that you can still apply. It's kind of a rolling window. But generally speaking, if you're still in university, or if you're still if you're still in university, you want to start applying the year before, or much 6 to 9 months earlier before you actually will graduate. That is generally when the application windows for large tech companies open up for new grad and internship roles.
Mm-hmm. The next question is, if you negotiate for a senior role, how can you tell if you are IC4 or IC5 detailed level to be able to negotiate? And I think this is straight up, like, you can ask the recruiter, like within the process, like maybe even at the beginning, just ask like, what level is this role for that I'm interviewing at, and try to get an answer for them. And if they are iffy about it and they don't give you, they're saying we're trying to decide what level you should be at, like, I think like making sure that you ask at even the different stages of the process, just making sure you clarify, okay, so what level have you evaluated me at after you like interview, and just making sure you get clarity on that so that you can, you know what to ask for in terms of compensation.
So I think for right now, we'll take a pause and we'll ask folks if anyone wants to share your experience. Put it. I think the other co-host can help me over here, but we'll try to get you unmuted and get you able to share your experience. If you've gone through the interview process recently, or if you have any unique experiences you'd want to share, we'd love to hear from you. Anyone? Any takers?
I think everybody should be able to unmute themselves. If they can't, then say something in the chat.
Okay, great. Has no one gotten an offer yet in these times? I hope that's not the case, but
not exactly correlated, but I laughed at started applying 1 year ago, because 1 year ago I was doing construction management, not software engineering. But I forget who asked the question, but somebody was asking about like base salary, whether like the company was saying that you're going to get a performance bonus. I worked at a company where I had a base salary and I had a metrics bonus, just like purely based off work I do. And then I had another one where I got a performance bonus. And in both cases, I have zero regrets about negotiating like a salary, the base salary upfront, because like Zaheer mentioned, in my performance bonus one, they didn't give me like a raise or a bonus later, but like I was at the same rate that my other peers were. So like it wasn't that big of a deal. But like if I didn't do that, like you just have more time with a higher salary. So like don't ever like not negotiate because they say that.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, I just wanted to share my experience. I recently moved from Europe to the United States, and I started looking for a job earlier this year. I got an offer about a month ago, and it got rescinded because of the COVID, which was pretty harsh for me. But based on that experience, I feel like I wasn't able to evaluate my worth correctly because not having lived in the US, I wasn't able to know exactly what to ask for. I did actually use Levels.fyi to kind of get an idea of what I should ask for. And I asked for a lower number and they came out with a higher salary than I asked for. So I feel like it still would have been a good offer for me, but I still feel like I'm not really in touch with what the salary should be for me in the United States. So if you have like more information for me, how can I accurately target a good or relevant salary range, that will be really helpful.
Cool. That's a great thank you definitely for sharing that. And I think that I do want to reiterate the point where it is almost never in your favor to share a number with the recruiters, because if you come up with a number, again, there's a good chance that it might be too low, right? And so I definitely want to reiterate, please try not to, like if a recruiter asks you for a salary range and things, definitely deflect that question. As far as coming up with a general salary range of, definitely for specific companies, I recommend looking at the site. For a general range, I can tell you that, in generally speaking, in the Bay Area, if you're looking at a new grad offer, the top companies will be offering close to around 150, about 150K in that general range, plus or minus 30-ish K at the top tier companies. I'm talking like FANG and that sort of level of companies. For a senior level engineer, for a second tier engineer, that moves up to about 200K, and sometimes can even go up to 230 to 250K. And so those are some rough numbers that should give you like sort of table stakes of figuring out, okay, where you might fall. But that said, again, we have some pages that are for locations. We have some pages, like for example, a page for salaries in Austin, or a page for salaries in the Bay Area. So definitely take a look at those for more specific data points.
Yeah, and also wanted to, I guess, mention our compensation page, which has the search functionality. You can also kind of filter by years of experience and different kind of, even different tags that you search for. So like, for example, if your discipline is like in security, then you might want to look for specifically security salaries, and you can search for that using our compensation page. So but I also think like, some forums may help. If you can kind of ask, like if your company's not available, like one thing is you can also message us, like we can try to help you as best as we can in terms of negotiation. But outside of that, it also helps to kind of join like different forums and like see if you can kind of like, like wiggle out some information about like, specific companies or industries or locations that may not be, like we might not have a complete picture of right now.
I definitely found a company on your website. It's just that I wasn't able to properly map my experience level. So I was the one asking about IC4 or IC5. So I was definitely for interviewing for a senior role, but based on my experience, I wasn't able to narrow down which category I would be in that company. So I gave them a range, and then they came up with a salary above what I asked for. So I felt pretty foolish. And this is definitely because, you know, I'm from a different continent, and I don't have like a good reality check for what's going on in the Bay Area. But I felt like, okay, it's a senior role, but how do I know exactly IC4, IC5 or above? And I never had the courage to ask my recruiter because, you know, back in Europe, you don't have this open communication with recruiters. And if you do ask that, you are generally put down. So based on my previous experience, I felt like I shouldn't be able to ask that question. It's more of a cultural barrier. It's just, yeah, I should have reached out to you guys, and maybe you would have cleared this out for me previously. But yeah, this is my experience.
So one thing I want to mention on that is you brought up a good point. How do you actually calibrate your level if you're not actually familiar with the leveling scheme? We've actually come up with a leveling standard, which is kind of a generic leveling scheme across sort of all companies. And it can help you calibrate because we also include details of the roles and responsibilities for that level. So I've linked it in the chat below. And you'll see, if you go to that link, you'll see in 3 columns of companies, you'll see Google and Facebook on the right, but then you'll see standard on the left. And the standard has a couple of, has a kind of a generic leveling scheme. So you'll see it starts with software engineer, goes to senior engineer, staff engineer, principal, and then distinguished. And then if you click on any of the levels, you'll also see the scope and impact for that level. So as an example, at the first level, you're typically expected to simply develop and maintain low to moderately complex components, working on a team, and you're typically receiving guidance from experienced team members. Whereas if you click on the second level, you'll see that you're now expected to own, you know, a moderate complexity project. So hopefully that, you know, we have some work to improve that, but I think hopefully that gives you a starting point to actually figure out which level you should fall on.
Yeah, that would have helped a lot because they wanted me to start something new in terms like they don't have an expert in the field. So I could have really narrowed it down based on the description of their need. That would have helped me. It was definitely not a role where they had a team functioning and they wanted me just to join the team. It was something that I would have really helped the company develop in the future. So yeah, that's really good. I'm going to check it out. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep. Anyone else would like to share their experience or unique sort of things that they've had in these times? No. We are happy to answer any more questions. I don't know how we're doing. How are we doing on time, folks?
We're almost at the end of our schedule time, so maybe we can pick 2 more questions from the Q&A, and you guys can answer that.
Yeah, sounds
great.
good.
Yeah, sounds good. How would you, this is a good question here, how would you account for years of experience if you switch domains within tech, for example, from hardware to software engineering? That's a great question. I think, again, I would actually point you to the leveling standard. Something interesting in this regard is, although because you've switched domains, although your technical side of things may not be the same caliber, typically leveling is based on 2 sort of distinct things. There's like there's the technical side of leveling, and then there's also the soft skills and the leadership side of leveling. And so although you might not have the technical expertise, it is possible that you have the leadership expertise for that role, right? So have you led a team? Have you managed a project? Those sorts of things. And so again, it's not like a one-size-fits-all. I can't tell you that, oh, okay, based on this level, now that you switch domains, you'll fall on this level. But I think I would look at that, and I would look at the position and the qualifications for the position, or the roles and responsibilities for the position that you're applying to, and try to gauge whether, you know, whether you meet the technical, whether you meet the leadership caliber. If you meet the leadership caliber, then you know, to go back and look at the technical caliber, whether you will be able to, you know, meet that. And even if you're not able to meet that, then maybe can you, you know, is the company okay with your leadership skills overweighing some of your technical skills for that area? I know, you know, I've seen where former hardware engineers are able to still come in at the same level that if they were senior level, they can still come in at a senior level because they have the problem solving ability, the leadership experience to actually be at that level, even if they don't necessarily have the same software experience. So again, it's not a one size fits all. I don't think I can answer it necessarily for everyone, but I would just make sure to look at those two different sides of the coin for a position, is the leadership and the technical side.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a very good answer. If a recruiter asks you that, can you bring this up? Like, it's like, oh, I don't have maybe the same one-on-one mapping of the technical skills, but I do have it in the other soft skills. Is it something you should bring up to the recruiter?
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth bringing that up to the recruiter and highlighting your leadership qualities that you have. And I think that is part of the leveling conversation, or part of the leveling negotiation that you can bring up. Is if they're trying to down level you, then say no, I have this leadership experience, although I don't have the technical track, the same technical experience. These are examples of how I'm my problem solving ability and how I'm able to learn quickly, and why I believe I should fall on this other level. Now, it won't always work. Again, it depends on the company and how much they value leadership experience. As an example, Amazon heavily values leadership experience, whereas companies like Google heavily value technical competence. Amazon's interviews lean very heavily on their leadership traits that they call, and a good chunk of the interviews is just soft skills. Whereas Google, it's very little soft skills, very heavy on the technical side. So it depends on the company. It'll vary by company, and it'll also vary on your personal experience.
Yeah, and I wanted to add, just I guess, depending on the level you were at for the previous kind of field you were in. I mean, I think it still falls under the bucket of engineering, and so if you're under principal engineer level, I would still use the level that you were previously at for hardware engineering as sort of an anchor to say, hey, this was the level I was at previously.
Cool, thank you. That's very helpful.
A couple questions. If you're not getting contacted for interviews after applying, how to handle that essentially. I think it's definitely worth reaching out to recruiters directly. Sometimes recruiters also have a tough job where they're getting they might be seeing hundreds of applicants or hundreds of people for just a single role, and it's a good way to stand out by reaching out to recruiters. If there's any recruiters on the call, then feel free to share your experience, but I generally have found it positive to reach out to recruiters in my own personal experiences and through experiences that I've helped other engineers with. So I do think that it is okay to actually reach out to recruiters directly on LinkedIn and follow up on applications. First time in tech, how do you account for your worth in salary negotiation? I guess this is similar to kind of the leveling question, where let's say if the question is if you're now considering tech lead roles, whereas previously you were mostly an IC. As a tech lead, you're falling typically as a level 2 or level 3 engineer, more likely a level 3 engineer. And so again, you can get that kind of by looking at our the leveling standard that we have linked. So you'll want to look at salaries and compensation for that range. So definitely refer to, I think, the third or second level, and hopefully that helps you find, what the right salary should be at that range.
And I also think it depends on the company you're joining. So if it's a small to mid-sized organization, that might differ a lot from a larger organization. And a lot of our information kind of, we get a lot more information for larger companies on our site. So that's something to, I guess, be wary of. But you can once again refer to that just to get a sense for what these roles compensations look like.
There's a good question here. How do I show that I'm a quick learner? Will that hurt or help? The best way to show that is through examples, through giving a situation. And I think the best form of practically speaking, how do you actually come up with a story or come up with an example in an interview, the best method I've seen is actually following the STAR method, if you've heard of it. It stands for situation, task, action, result, I believe. And it's a method of coming up and with a summary of an experience, or coming up with sort of coming up with an example. So just Google it, STAR method, and you'll see many examples of how to actually frame and give an example, frame an example that you have appropriately. It's a great method. Definitely show examples. Let's see, I'm not seeing any other questions. Anyone else have any final questions?
Well, great. I also want to just, if anyone has any lingering questions, we're available through the site. Like, you can message us on there, and you can also feel free to email us at hello@levels.fyi. And we're happy to kind of help out in any way we can. These slides, I believe, will be sent out. So if there's anything you missed, like, you should be able to just grab that from the organizers. So yeah, thank you, everyone.
So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you, Zaheer and Zuhayeer, for sharing tips. The key takeaway for me is probably never give a number when you're negotiating. So that's very important. And I hope everyone has some key takeaway too for themselves. So we will we'll end the events. Stop recording.